Persona in recent times has become one of the most well-renowned franchises of all time, with great stories and gameplay experiences to be had, but it can be quite daunting to get into. With a rich history of nearly 30 years, there have been a lot of games, remakes, remasters, all that good jazz released, which can leave newcomers scratching their head. What game should I start with? What order should I play them in? What versions of the games do I play? Where do I even play them in the first place? These questions and any more you may have are completely valid, and in today's video I will try to tackle any and all of them for you to get your Persona journey started on the right track. There will be timestamps attached to this video, so feel free to use them at your own leisure. Since there's a lot to go into, I'll keep the intro short and get this show on the road, but if you enjoy the video, please consider dropping a like and a sub. Thank you. The most common question I see is where should a newcomer to the series start, so that's as good a place as any to begin. I'll give a short answer before we go into the more long answer. You can start with basically any game you want to, except Persona 2 and the spin-offs. Now for the longer answer. Persona 3 through 5 are kinda like Final Fantasy, where you don't need to play the games that came before to enjoy them, but it might help since they're all connected in one way or another. They take place in different settings, tackle different themes, different characters, so if your eye is on any of these three, just go wild and play it. The reason you should not play the spin-offs first is because they act as direct sequels to the games, so you're not going to have any idea what's going on story-wise. Not recommended. With Persona 2, however, that game is a direct sequel to Persona 1, hence why you should not start with it. If you want to start with Persona 1, then honestly that's not a bad idea. I think it's quite a decent game for what it is, and it sets a baseline for the series going forward. The only reason I won't say you have to or even really should is because it's just unrealistic. These games aren't readily available for all people to play nowadays, but we'll get to that in due time. If you want my personal recommendation on which to start with if you're on the fence, I'd say Persona 4 Golden is your best bet. Now, I don't just say this because it's my favorite game in the series. I say this because it's the cheapest mainline game you can buy in the series, going as low as $7 in some instances. You can't really go wrong with buying it at that price. Persona 4 Golden on sale is even cheaper than the old Sona games on the PlayStation Store, and if you're like me and you hate spending money, this is a big deal. It also has an amazing cast, solid gameplay, and it sets a baseline for the series. If you want to start with a more modern entry, then Persona 3 Reload or Persona 5 Royal are going to be your best options. Royal out of these two is going to be the cheapest one to get, so again, if price is a factor, this is your best option. I personally started with base Persona 5 on the PlayStation 4, so I can vouch for P5 as your entry to the series if you so desire. Some may find it hard to go back to the older games in the series after playing it, but honestly, if you're like me and play games for the stories and characters more so than the gameplay, the differences in gameplay won't be that big of a deal. Really, where to start isn't too complicated on paper. You start with either Persona 1, 3, 4, or 5. But this leads us to our next question. Which versions of these games should you play? This is where it gets a bit messy because there's debates on this to this day, but I'll do my best to keep this concise. Let's start with Persona 1. Your options for this game are the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation Portable versions of the game. Straight off the bat, you should under no circumstances play the Revelations Persona version of this game on PS1. It's one of the worst localizations of all time, where it changes the names and race of characters and sprinkles racism on top just for fun. So yeah, don't play that version. That leaves us with the Japanese Megami Ibunoku Persona and the Persona 1 on PSP. There are good arguments to play the Japanese version of Persona 1, like the OST differences, but if I'm being 100% real here, I recommend saving yourself the trouble and just play the PSP version. While yes, it's not a perfect version of the game, the translations are pretty damn good and it's the most simple one to get. If you want to play the Japanese version in English, you'll need to use a mod to do so, and at that point for a beginner's guide, I'm not putting y'all through that. Play Persona 1 PSP and be done with it. You can buy it on the PS Vita store if you have one, or you can emulate it on the PPSSPP emulator. With Persona 2 Innocent Sin, this is the exact same case as Persona 1. The PS1 version does have some arguments on why you might want to play it over the PSP counterpart, but for simplicity's sake, I really just recommend playing the PSP version and calling it a day. If you feel comfortable or compelled to use the English patches for these games, then be my guest, it's not a bad way to play them, but the PSP versions are fine enough for the vast majority of people, I'd say. Both P1 and P2 are on the PlayStation Vita store for $20, which is pretty damn egregious, not gonna lie. But unfortunately, this is your only option to get them legit. All I'ma say is, modding your Vita is pretty easy, so you can look into that if you wish. Highly recommended. Persona 2 Eternal Punishment is the only one I'd say is kinda worth going out of your way with the patch, since the only English version is the one for the PS1, and it has glaring issues with the translations. With that said, if you don't mind putting up with some weird things like Cade Nanjo being named Nate Nanjo, it's an enjoyable enough experience. This game will run you $10 on the PS Vita store, so not a bad price actually. I will say though, that Persona 2 Eternal Punishment on the PSP has some exclusive content that you can't see without the patch. It's called the Tatsuya scenario, and as you'd expect, you play as Tatsuya. It's pretty important to the story, so it's just something to consider. Like I said before though, if you're not comfortable doing it or you just don't want to, then the PS1 version will mostly be fine. Persona 3 is where things get very contentious. In fact, this is the most contentious debate in the entire community probably. The three main versions people debate between are Persona 3 FES, Persona 3 Portable, and Persona 3 Reload. Persona 3 Portable is the cheapest and easiest here to get, but if I can be honest, I don't really recommend this version of the game, at least the modern ports. Now, I like Persona 3 Portable, so if you really want to play it, you can, but just know the modern ports use these grody AI upscale textures, they have horrible audio quality, they're just not very good. I know it has the female protagonist, but if you want to play her, I'd say do it after playing one of the other versions. That leaves us with FES and Reload, a debate that has gone on for over a year, like people have been debating this before Reload even came out. I'm not elitist toward either side, so all I'll say is play whichever version looks cooler to you or is more convenient to you. FES is unfortunately stuck on the PlayStation 2 with no signs of a port in sight. It does have a version on the PlayStation 3 PSN store for $10 if you have a PlayStation 3 lying around like your boy. If that's the case, then yeah, sure, give it a shot. If not, then Reload on the other hand is available on most platforms to buy and play right now. It will cost you a pretty penny, but it is the best version to play on modern hardware as of now. It goes on sale pretty often, so I'd say wait for a sale before picking it up. Even if you got the dough to buy it at full price, there's no need to when you can get it cheaper. I'm just trying to look out for y'all. So yeah, my recommendation when it comes to Persona 3 is FES or Reload, and save Portable for a possible second playthrough. Persona 4 is kind of similar to Persona 3 in terms of which version people recommend to play, so the PS2 version versus the remastered Golden version. The PS2 version does indeed have a much different atmosphere with the visual presentation via the fog and whatnot, and I do personally like it more. This is also on the PS3 store for $10, so if this version of the game looks better to you and you have the means to play it, I'd say consider it. If not, then Golden is perfectly fine to start with. It's mostly the same, the differences are that a new character named Arai is introduced to the story, Chie's voice actress is different, and there were a ton of quality of life changes to the Persona fusing mechanic and etc. If you're not aware of what Persona fusing is or how it works, I'll keep it simple and say the changes in Golden make it much less annoying and much faster to fuse a Persona to use in battle. That alone is enough for me to just recommend Golden, but it being on all modern platforms for a good price, Golden is my choice for P4, but like I said, if you want to play the PS2 version, then that's good as well. Finally, we come to Persona 5. This one isn't really contested much since it's between base P5 and P5 Royal. I don't think there's any real reason for a newcomer to not just go with Royal. It has more to offer, so once again, unless price is an issue, just go with Royal. If you do end up going with vanilla Persona 5 for whatever reason, it's still a good version of the game, it's not the biggest deal. Like I said, Royal just has more to offer. To summarize, the versions of the mainline games I recommend playing are as shown on screen. It honestly isn't the biggest deal which versions of the games you choose to play. Your interest in the games is what's important above all else, so if somehow, someway Revelations Persona seems like the version you want to go with, then go for it, I won't stop you. You might hear some elitist comments like, oh my god, you started with Persona 5, you're a fake fan, or oh my goodness, you played Reload or Portable over FES? You like soulless games, like don't let that get to you, it's not a big deal. Play the versions that look cool to you and call it a day, because there's no perfect or definitive way to play these games. Now we finally answered where to start and which versions to play, but here comes yet another daunting aspect for some people. Where the hell do you start with games this long? Should I use a 100% perfect guide? Should I do whatever I want? What should I do? This section will mostly refer to Persona 3 and onward, since Persona 1 and 2 are pretty simple and straightforward. The modern Sona games, as they're called in the community, use a calendar system where you're given choices on what to do on a day-by-day basis. You can do social links to become closer to the characters in the game, perform various tasks to raise your social stats to talk to the social links, and so on and so forth. You only have a limited amount of time in these games, with each game lasting a little under a year in universe. You get 2 actions per day, but it can be lower depending on the story moments. On top of that, you have to balance these aspects with the dungeon crawling, and with the game this long, it can cause some anxiety on what you should do. No one wants to miss out on content in their games, so here are my general recommendations. If you're someone who straight up cannot fathom missing out on content in your games, then consider using a guide online. You can use any type of guide you think you need, but if you want the path of least resistance, just use a 100% walkthrough. They'll tell you how to and when to do everything to see all content. If you're someone who does not want to use a guide, I just want to emphasize that if you don't get every little thing done in the game on your first playthrough, that's completely okay. Your playthrough and experience is valid all the same, and you shouldn't feel like you're not allowed to play the game just because you aren't perfect. I think you're fine just the way you are. The last thing we gotta go over to get you on track for greatness is how to approach the spin-offs. Now, there are a lot of spin-offs, but instead of giving an in-depth analysis about each, I'm just gonna try to give you a timeline of how you should play each game. Keep in mind, if there's a spin-off you're particularly interested in and you don't want to wait, you can go ahead and play it. This is meant to be a general recommendation for those who might be curious. Persona 3 only has Persona 3 Dancing, so you can play that after beating P3 itself. Persona 4 has 3 spin-offs, and the order you should play them after P4 itself is Erina, Erina Ultimax, then Dancing. After that is Persona Q, which you should play after beating both P3 and P4, since those games have a ton of fan service for both of those games. Persona 5 has the most spin-offs of any of them, but the order for these would go Tactica, Dancing, and Strikers. The order for this isn't too important, but Strikers basically acts as a direct sequel to Persona 5, so just keep that in mind. There's also Persona Q2, which is the same case as Q1, but this game has the P5 cast now. You can play this whenever, it's not really that big of a deal. Then there's of course the Persona 5 gacha game coming to global soon, Persona 5 The Phantom X. This takes place in a different reality than Persona 5 itself, so really you don't need to play P5 at all to play this one. I recommend you do, but it's not a requirement. I know that might be a lot to take in since I just spat out informational vomit for lack of better words. I promise once you actually get into the spin-offs, if you want to, it becomes a lot less confusing than it seems on the surface. It can just get a little murky when there's 30 years of games to consider. With the spin-offs covered, I believe that about wraps up everything you might need to know if you're interested in getting into the Persona series. It's a lovely series and it's my favorite one of all time, so I hope this video makes you feel more comfortable with giving it a try. It's not as daunting as it might seem initially once it's broken down, and once you get into the mainline games, you can try out the spin-offs. If you have any questions on something I might have missed in this video, feel free to comment down below and I will try to get to you as soon as I can. That's really all I gotta say for this video. If you found it helpful or entertaining, please consider dropping a like and a sub. It helps the channel out a lot, and I'll give you a free cookie as always. Here you go, homie. It's been your boy Yandere Gogeta, and I will see you in the next video. Peace out everybody, and have a great day.